Elias sat on the cracked stone of the old ruined wall, looking out at the endless expanse of sand and dust that surrounded him. The desert planet had been his home for the past few days, and now it felt like his tomb. His ship, the Crimson Voyager, was nothing more than a pile of twisted metal and broken parts. His supplies were gone. Water, food, even his spare fuel had run out days ago. And now, as the sun beat down relentlessly on the barren landscape, it was clear that he was running out of time. His fingers tightened around the last ration pack he had left, but he knew he could not eat it. The food, packed in a small square pouch, was meant for an emergency. Elias had been in dangerous situations before, but none like this. A thick haze of dust swirled in the air, and there was no sign of life. It was the perfect moment to give in, to let the desert take him. And yet he couldn't. There was something deep inside that pushed him to survive, perhaps a remnant of a life he had long abandoned, or a simple belief in the stubbornness of his will. But whatever it was, it kept him going. He wiped the sweat from his brow and looked over the wreckage of his ship once more. The Crimson Voyager had been his pride and joy, a ship that had taken him to the farthest reaches of the galaxy. It had been his home, his refuge. Now it was nothing but an empty shell, its engines crushed, its communication system dead. There was no way to call for help. He was alone on a dead world, with nothing to rely on but his own strength and the last shred of his determination. Elias leaned back against the broken wall and closed his eyes for a moment, the silence around him oppressive. The wind howled faintly, a reminder the time was running out. He could feel the hunger gnawing at his insides, his body weakening by the hour. His mind wandered to the days before, to the people he had known, to the life he had left behind. In the vastness of space, where planets and stars stretched endlessly, he had been a wanderer, a lone explorer. He had chosen this life, a life of solitude, because it was all he had ever known. But now, in the quiet of this forgotten planet, he found himself questioning everything. It was then that he heard it, a faint sound barely noticeable over the wind. At first, Elias thought it was just the desert playing tricks on his mind, but the sound grew louder. His heart skipped a beat. He stood up, squinting against the bright light, trying to see through the haze of dust. And there, just beyond the ruins, he saw a figure. A woman. She appeared out of nowhere, walking through the storm of dust as if she were unaffected by it. Her figure was regal, her stance unwavering, but it was her eyes that held his attention. They were dark, like the deep space between the stars, and they seemed to pierce through the storm. Through him. Her face was calm, composed, as though she had no fear of the desolation around her. She wore clothes unlike anything he had seen before, an ancient, flowing robe of silver and black, embroidered with strange symbols. She looked like something out of a forgotten legend. Elias didn't move at first. His exhaustion clouded his thoughts, and for a moment he wondered if he was hallucinating. But the woman kept walking, her presence undeniable, her steps deliberate. There was something about her that didn't belong in this place, in this wasteland. Yet there she was. He stumbled toward her, his legs weak from hunger and thirst.
"Who are you?" he called out, his voice rough from days without water. The woman stopped in her tracks, her eyes meeting his.
For a long moment, neither spoke. Elias couldn't explain it, but there was a sense of power in her gaze, a power that both intimidated and mesmerized him. She didn't speak right away. Instead, she looked at him, as though assessing him, deciding something in her mind. Finally, her voice broke the silence, soft and melodic, but with an edge of authority. "You gave me your last meal." Elias blinked, confused.
"What? You gave me your last meal?" she repeated, stepping closer.
"Your kindness will be remembered."
Elias felt a chill run down his spine, but words didn't make sense.
He had given her nothing. He had nothing to give. But as she spoke, the memory hit him like a wave. A few hours ago, when he had almost given up hope, she had appeared, walking out of the dust storm like a vision. She was starving, her clothes torn and her face gaunt from hunger. Without thinking, Elias had offered her what little food he had left, his final ration pack. He had done it without a second thought, driven by an impulse to help someone in need, even if that someone was a stranger. But now, hearing her words, he felt a sense of unease. Who was she? How could she know what he had done? And why did she seem so calm, so unearthly? Before Elias could speak again, the woman reached into the folds of her robe and pulled out a small object, a metal pendant, intricately designed. She held it out to him. "Take this," she said. "It will guide you when the time comes." He stared at the pendant for a long moment, unsure of what to do. It seemed to hum with an energy he couldn't explain, a strange pull that beckoned him. Something inside him told him he should take it, that it was important. Slowly, he reached out and took the pendant from her hand. The moment his fingers brushed the cool metal, he felt a rush of energy flood through him, as if he were connected to something far greater than himself. The woman smiled, a knowing, almost sad smile. "I have shown you the path," she said, "but it is up to you to follow it." With that, she turned and began to walk away, her figure disappearing into the dust storm as suddenly as she had appeared.
Elias stood there, staring at the spot where she had been, the pendant still warm in his hand.
What had just happened? He had given her his last meal, and in return, she had given him this strange, powerful object. What was the meaning of it all? Was she real, or had he finally lost his mind to the desert? But the more he thought about it, the more he realized that it didn't matter. She had come to him for a reason, and now he had something he couldn't ignore. The pendant wasn't just an object. It was a sign that something far bigger than his lonely survival on this dead planet was waiting for him. Something he had no choice but to follow. Elias knew, deep down, that the journey he had been on was only just beginning. The days passed in a haze, and Elias found himself still sitting amidst the wreckage of his ship. The heat of the desert never seemed to wane, and the wind blew relentlessly, carrying with it the dry, choking dust that filled the air. He spent his time trying to repair the ship, though deep down he knew it was beyond saving. The Crimson Voyager was a relic now, something from a different time, a time when his life had been full of purpose, of movement, of the stars. But here, on this barren planet, there was only stillness. Even with all the work he had to do, his mind kept returning to the woman. Her face, those eyes, there was something about her that he couldn't shake off. She had given him the pendant, and now it lay heavy in his pocket, as if it had taken on a life of its own. He couldn't explain it, but every time he touched it, he felt the oddest sensation. It was almost as though it were calling to him, urging him to do something, to follow some unseen path. But what was that path, and why had she given him this strange token? The questions gnawed at him, distracting him from his work. He had always been a man of action, preferring to solve problems with his hands, not his mind. But this was different. There was no practical solution to this. There was only mystery. And the more Elias thought about it, the more certain he became that he was meant to do something. The woman had said the path was his to follow, but he still didn't understand what that meant. One evening, as the last rays of sunlight faded behind the horizon, Elias sat by the wreckage of the ship, gazing into the vast expanse of the desert. The loneliness of the planet had settled on him like a heavy weight. He had been alone for so long, even in the crowded vastness of space. His isolation had always been self-imposed. He had chosen to wander the galaxy, searching for something, though he wasn't sure what. But now the loneliness felt different. It wasn't just the absence of others. It was the silence, the feeling that something important was slipping through his fingers, something he couldn't quite grasp. That's when he heard it again. The sound. A soft hum, barely audible but unmistakable. The The sound seemed to come from deep within his chest, as though it were resonating with the pendant in his pocket. Elias stood up quickly, his heart racing. He didn't know where the sound was coming from, but he was certain it was linked to the pendant. It was calling to him, and it was time to answer. Without thinking, he turned toward the wreckage of the ship and gathered his few belongings. The heat of the day was fading, and the desert was starting to cool. He looked one last time at the ship. His ship, the one he had failed to save. But there was no time for regret. Something had changed, and it was pulling him away from this place. He didn't know where it would lead, but he knew he couldn't stay here any longer. Elias took the first step into the unknown. The night was quiet as he made his way across the desert, the only sound the crunch of his boots on the dry ground. The stars above him stretched out in endless constellations, a reminder of the infinite vastness of the universe. And yet, for the first time in a long time, Elias felt a sense of direction. He wasn't just drifting anymore. He was walking towards something, even if he couldn't see what it was. Hours passed and he felt the weight of exhaustion begin to take over. The desert had no mercy, and every step felt like a battle against the unforgiving landscape. Yet the pendant in his pocket seemed to grow warmer, more insistent, as if it were guiding him. At dawn, the sun began to rise in the east, casting long shadows across the sand. Elias paused for a moment, looking out across the horizon. He had been walking through the night, his body weary, but he didn't feel the need to stop. The pendant had led him this far, and he couldn't deny the pull he felt. That's when he saw it. In the distance, through the haze of morning light, there was a shape. It wasn't the flat, barren landscape he had grown used to. No, this was different. There, rising above the dunes, was a structure. It was massive, ancient, and unmistakable.
It was a city. Elias's heart skipped a beat.
A city? On a planet like this? It didn't make sense. He had searched this world for days, and there had been no sign of life. But now, here it was. This towering, enigmatic city, hidden from view until just this moment. He didn't know why he was drawn to it, but every instinct in his body told him to move forward. As he approached the city, Elias's mind raced. How could a city exist here, so far from civilization? And who had built it? The architecture was unlike anything he had ever seen before. Sweeping, grand arches, shining metal that reflected the light of the sun in strange patterns, and towering spires that seemed to defy the laws of gravity. It was as if this city had been left behind by some ancient civilization, forgotten by time. He walked closer, his curiosity overwhelming any fear he might have had. The city seemed abandoned, but there was a strange energy in the air, an undeniable presence that made him feel as though he were being watched. As he crossed the threshold into the heart of the city, the pendant in his pocket grew warm once again. He could feel its pull, stronger than ever. It was guiding him toward something, toward a place within the city. But where? The city's silence was deafening. It felt as though the place was holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. Elias continued forward, his steps echoing in the empty streets. The closer he got to the center, the more intense the feeling grew, as if someone was waiting for him. And then he saw it. In the center of the city stood a massive, towering structure. It was unlike anything else in the city, more intricate, more powerful, as though it were the heart of the entire place. At the top of the structure, on a platform high above, Elias could make out a figure. It was her. Queen Islara. She stood there, looking down at him with those same piercing eyes that had haunted him ever since their first meeting. She hadn't changed at all. There was no sign of weariness on her face, no sign that she had ever been in the desert, struggling for survival. She was every bit the regal figure she had been before, and Eyeless realized, with a shock, that she had been waiting for him all along. She raised her hand, and suddenly, Elias felt a shift in the air. The ground beneath him trembled slightly, as though the entire city were alive, and the energy from the pendant surged through his body. "Elias," she said, her voice echoing in the vastness of the city. "You've found your path." And at that moment, Elias knew. The journey he had started, the path that had led him to this moment, was not just about survival. It was about something much greater, something that stretched beyond his understanding, beyond this city, beyond the galaxy. He had been chosen for a reason.